Sometimes the future isn't just written. Sometimes it's rewritten. And sometimes it fights back. You're listening to the Curvature Chronicles. Welcome to the Curvature Chronicles podcast. This story is called The Curvature Key, a science fiction audio journey where ancient galactic mysteries collide with alien wars. I'm Dean Williams, the author. I'll be your guide all the way through. Today, we'll meet Castor Ames, an ordinary student whose life is upended when he stumbles upon a strange book. One that doesn't just tell stories, but reshapes reality. As shadows close in and unlikely allies emerge, the key to survival may lie in the pages of a book that was never meant for human hands.
For Castor Ames antique shops just had that. Something. As an anthropology student, he'd spent a fair amount of time roaming around in the dusty, cinnamon-mixed-with-ozone-smelling places. Yesterday's Tomorrow was just such a place. A perfect place to unwind for 30 minutes between the lecture he'd sat through on non-linear time perception and tribal mythologies, and finding something to eat. He was a master at finding things that were part of the past that belonged in the present. He had just taken in the general ambiance of the place when a flash of light off maybe 20 feet up and to his left drew his attention. Drew it until the guy behind the register interrupted his focus.
Anything I can help you find?
Castor hated this question. It was standard practice, but if he knew what he wanted to find, he'd just order from Amazon.
No, not today. Just browsing for now.
The man behind the counter nodded and went back to his crossword puzzle. The crash was loud. Castor started in that direction as he heard the guy behind the counter cursing under his breath about bulls in China shops should stay in China, when he got flattened by a large older man running in the other direction. He stopped and looked down at Castor. The chills that were in Castor's spine didn't run up and down because the chills were too scared to move when that man was looking at him.
Hey!
The counter guy yelled as he headed over.
Are you okay? You break anything back there?
The man, whose skin looked positively grey, didn't answer. He just turned and fled out of the store.
Didn't expect to find a loony like that making the noise.
He looked down at Castor.
I expected to find a kid. He shook his head and offered Castor a hand. You okay, son? Didn't play football, did you?
Castor took the hand and got to his feet. He put his hand on the back of his now throbbing neck.
No, baseball was my sport.
Really? I got old cards back in the back, if you're a collector.
Not today.
Castor and the cashier both walked back to where the grey man had ran from.
Oh, hell, what a mess. Looks like that idiot body-slammed the whole table.
Grumbling under his breath, the man went towards the back. Castor could see why the guy was pissed. There were probably thousands of dollars worth of broken glass and furniture. Didn't look like the grey man had body-slammed anything. Looked like he jumped out of the rafters on top of it. He picked up a dented mechanical parrot made of copper and feathers and sat it back on the shelf with the "Do Not Feed" sign on it. Straightening up a stack of encyclopedias and assorted books, he kept hearing a ticking sound but couldn't find a clock. Then he saw it. The book, bound in cracked brown leather. No title, but with assorted symbols on it, was just, what was the word he was looking for? Waiting. Waiting for him to find it, yes. That book belonged somewhere other than where it was. Kind of like Castor himself felt a lot of the time growing up. He picked up the book, and it almost felt like an electric charge ran up his arm. He'd have to get his neck checked out before too long. That tackling dummy routine might have messed something up. He flipped the little silver clasp on the side and opened it to a random page near the middle. The words read, "You're going to get coffee spilled on you." He snorted out loud. I don't even drink coffee. And yet,
Hey, what you got there? Looks like you found something after all, son. You buying that?
Castor looked down at the book and felt himself nodding.
Yeah, it looks pretty interesting.
Tell you what, son. Give an old man a hand cleaning this up the rest of the way, and I'll knock 50% off.
Castor smiled and nodded again. Who was he to look the other way when a good deal jumped out of the blue at him, literally? About an hour and $30 later, Castor was walking through the central quadrant after finding 2 slices of pizza to call lunch. It was strange, downright weird, really, that he couldn't find many pages with writing on them. Almost all of them were blank, and the ones that weren't, Castor couldn't read despite having a minor in archaic languages. He was really good at Norse and could hold his own Latin, not helping him here. He was holding the book in his left hand, and the tingling feeling started at his wrist and was heading to his shoulder again.
Wait a minute,
Castor said out loud.
I landed on my right arm, not my left.
Okay, now that last statement was a lie. It was a lie because he was knocked down again by the same gray-skinned man from the shop.
Give it to me!
The man cried.
I have to have that artifact.
Castor was scared, but also a little bit angry at getting knocked down again. He scrambled to his feet.
Give what to you?
Castor stuck his finger in the man's face.
What is your problem? You can't just run around knocking people.
Somehow the guy was on him. So fast he grabbed the book and almost wrestled it away from me. I grabbed the book with both hands and twisted both my hands and body and managed to tear the book away, sending us both flying in opposite directions. Instantly it felt like I hit a wall, although somewhere in the back of my mind I knew that was impossible. Then all I knew was that I was on the ground. Again.
What is your problem? I bought this book. But if it was yours, we could have worked something out. But now...
Oh no, that book never belonged to him.
He turned toward the voice. The girl who'd spoke was staring calmly at Castor's attacker. The attacker stared back, but not so calmly. He was shaking with either anger or fear. It was hard to tell.
Did it thief? Did it belong to you?
She said. Then she turned toward Castor, unimpressed.
You're leaking,
she says dryly. The man suddenly turned and sprinted away from them. That old guy was so fast. After watching for a few moments, Castor turned. The girl was already looking at him.
I don't know what's going on here, but thanks,
Castor stammered.
Though I was in for a real fight with that guy, but you seemed to scare him away?
The last part of Castor's sentence sounded like a question because it was. There was very little frightening about this woman. She was, by anyone's standards, very attractive, right down to her dark, purple-black hair.
It's the hair, right?
She said.
Before you ask. It just seemed like the way to go, so I went.
She looked down at the book now open in his hands.
Curious. Huh.
She said.
That's new.
He looked down at the book, and a new line had appeared.
Trust her, even if she smells like espresso and starlight.
Yes, thought Castor. That was definitely new.
Hey, I don't even know your name. Mine is Castor, but people call me Cast for short. Plus, I don't feel like an oil.
He chuckled briefly at this old standby icebreaker he'd used. Most of the time, it got the other person at least smiling, if not chuckling back. Maybe there was a hint of a smile in those violet eyes, but the face never changed. Tough audience.
Okay, Castor. Now we've met. You can call me Sara.
Cast scrunched up his forehead in puzzlement.
Well, hi, Sara. What exactly did you mean when you said I was leaking earlier?
Well, you aren't exactly leaking. You just look like it.
He knotted his forehead up further until she continued.
You just look like you're leaking for the back of your shirt. When you pulled away from him and bounced off me, that's where I spilled my coffee on you.
They sat on a park bench where Sara swirled around a now new steaming cup of coffee. Since she'd said those words, "where I spilled my coffee," Cast's world had slowly started to spiral sideways. The book had been right. It had known what was going to happen. This just wasn't possible. And yet, here he was, sitting on a park bench with coffee stains, mostly dried now, on his shirt. He took a deep breath.
That's it. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Now exhale.
Are you in the medical school here?
Cast asked. She sipped her drink and shook her head.
No, I hang out in the hydrothermal dynamics part of this school. So, what exactly is up with your magic diary?
He thought for a second. The book had said to trust her. It was 1 for 1 so far.
It's not a diary. I've never written in it. Sometimes it seems to write in itself.
And how Cast remembered.
It told me a half hour before it happened that you'd spill coffee on me.
Now Sara leaned back with finally some expression on her face other than boredom. Her eyelashes fluttered before she spoke. Nice look, Castor thought.
It told you that I was going to spill coffee on you? It mentioned me by name?
Well, no, not by name.
He fessed up.
It just said, you are going to spill coffee on yourself. Which, I have to admit, I found funny since I don't drink coffee.
Oh, that can't be.
Sara said with just a little astonishment in her voice.
I know it's difficult to believe.
Difficult? Try next to impossible. I mean, I've never heard of someone not drinking coffee.
Cast stood there, mouth agape, not believing his ears. It was a fool's errand, trying to figure out if this girl was kidding or being genuine. They both looked down at the book page as spidery handwriting started to appear. He read it aloud. Don't trust men in gray. She raised an eyebrow.
What's that mean? Like, emotionally? Or their taste in fashion?
Cast raised an eyebrow back at her.
Neither. I think it's trying to warn us. You might not have gotten a good look at the guy trying to rip this book out of my hands. But he looked gray. Not just his clothes. I mean, right through his skin he looked gray. Like he was, I don't know, washed out or something. Like he was forgetting how to be a person.
She studies him for a second.
You realize that you just used the word us, right?
He nodded.
I do indeed realize that. You spilled coffee on me and made a prediction come true. Scared off well, I don't know what that guy is, but he sure wanted no part of you.
He realized that she was smiling, and that his eyes were traveling up and down her. He dropped his eyes to the ground, then focused on looking her in the eye. Damn, Cast, he thought to himself. Get it together. This has been the absolute weirdest day in probably history, but she was still smiling. He forced a smile of his own.
So, yes, at least until we can figure out what's going on. I think we're in this together.
She slurped her coffee loudly, raised an eyebrow, and said a single word.
Fair.
You know, you are probably the calmest person I've ever met. You haven't asked any questions about the book, even though you've seen with your own eyes it make predictions.
He rubbed his chin.
Maybe even have reality changed as we know it by the pages.
He narrowed his eyes slightly.
Then there's this gray guy character. I mean, I've only seen guys like him in movies and...
And?
She repeated.
And,
he began again.
You're not even surprised.
She snorted.
I study hydrothermal dynamics.
Castor started to laugh. He couldn't help himself. She leaned her head to the left and slurped another hit from her coffee.
Okay, what's so funny?
You are. I study hydrothermal dynamics. Like that explains everything.
She raised an eyebrow in challenge.
I study extreme flows of plasma across the surface of stars. I study solar flares, sunspots, differentials in radiation behavior. And you think this is weird?
Well, when you put it that way. But,
Yeah, Castor muttered. It is weird.
a little at least.
She puts an arm through one of his.
Come on, let's hit Boomer's coffee shop. I'm out.
Boomer's Coffee was a campus meeting place. had been for almost as long as the college had been in existence. Nestled under the university's library, it was the place to be, most of the time. Cast, although he went to the library regularly, had never been to Boomer's. He didn't drink coffee, so he hadn't seen the need. Today had been a day of firsts, though, so here he went. They found a table in the corner to sit. Place wasn't as busy as he'd imagined it would be.
Well, Castor,
She said with a glint in her eye.
since we're in this together, give me a pen and paper out of your backpack. I'm going to write down everything we know about the book and the man trying to take it from you.
She had emphasized man, oddly, but that was okay. The guy was odd. He grabbed a notebook and pen out and handed it to her. She began to write silently.
So while you're doing that, what should I do?
Now she looked up with a, "I never thought you'd ask" grin.
You can take you over to the counter and get us something to drink.
She looked down and started writing again.
I'll have the triple Nova shot with Sales espresso.
Castor paid for the drinks. He was still suspicious of any liquid that might come true in a prophecy, so he went with a raspberry mango lemonade. The black, swirly beverage that Sara ordered sounded and looked more like a classified jet propulsion experiment rather than a drink. But to each their own. He turned and started back across the place to their seats, and Sara dropped the pen and it rolled to the other side, underneath the table. The pen was completely out of reach. Any normal person would either get up and go around and get the pen, or reach under awkwardly trying to get it. Not Sara. She looked around briefly, then with a casual fluidity she grabbed the edge of the table and picked it up one-handed, as easily as she might have picked up a tray of muffins. Calmly as always, she rolled the pen back to her side with her foot and then picked the pen up. She returned the table to the ground and once again started to write. Castor just stood there with coffee and lemonade soaking into different shoes, where he'd lost control of both cups at the sight. His brain started to make excuses. It's lighter than it looks. She's an expert on leverage. His own eyes were wrong, and that hadn't just happened. Then the other side of his brain joined in. She sounds like a science paper. She drinks coffee like you breathe air. There's like an electrical charge that seems to follow her even indoors. Then that side of his brain won the argument. She felt like a wall when you ran into her in the park. Sound just disappeared for a moment. When he'd torn the book away from the grey man, he'd ran directly into her, knocking himself to the ground. What had she said? When you pulled away from him and bounced off me, that's where I spilled my coffee on you. He could almost hear the book under his arm whispering, "Trust her even if she smells like espresso and starlight." Well, he thought, I guess now that describes us both.
What took you so long?
She leaned toward him conspiratorially.
Is there a hidden line?
He took a deep breath. No line. After the day I've had, I just spilled our drinks. Castor smashed his lips together and nodded, as if trying to convince himself that was what happened. Yep, clumsy today. He sat the book on the table between them. Sara spun it toward herself and opened it.
Anything new?
Castor rubbed the back of his neck. New? No, nothing new. Maybe it's out of ink. Sara rolled her eyes.
Or maybe it's just waiting for the next act.
That snapped Castor out of his "what in the hell did I just see" state and back to the present. Sara, you think the book's sentient? She sat back in her chair like a queen bored with her own court and used both hands to ruffle her hair and nodded.
I think that it's messing with us. You'd be surprised how many things are. You all right, Castor?
Yep, he lied. The book fluttered to life. A new line appeared. You're not the only one watching. Sara reads it, but her expression doesn't change. Her knuckles whiten where her fingers tighten ever so slightly, gripping the table. It's like she knows what's coming. After a bit longer, Castor leaves Sara at Boomer's. He excused himself with a vague, "I've got an anthropology thing." He then actually does go to the anthropology lab, a place where the Wi-Fi is strong and the room's mostly empty. No one questions anyone about whatever late-night rabbit hole they might be going down. He starts with the university database, Sara Sudis. Very little comes up. Age, unknown. Birthplace, NA. There was a number under emergency contact. Castor tried it and got a disconnected satellite phone. Odder still was a medical exemption that read, Pro-terrestrial physiology. See department chair. He went back and added hydrothermal dynamics. A dozen or so physics papers were listed with Sara's name, and a couple of strange-looking graphs about solar turbulence. There's something. A paper she wrote about potential plasma filaments interacting with the hexagonal storm on Saturn. Someone had flagged it as exceeding known measurement quantification. Damn, that's not the type of flag that gets randomly thrown around. What did that flag even mean? Castor was more than beginning to wonder who he should be afraid of. The grey man or Sara? Sara lingered a while at the table after Castor left. She pretended to scroll, but her senses were prickling. She had a pretty good idea what the book meant when it had written, "You're not the only one watching." Not a question of who, but when. The temperature and the shadows seem to thicken unnaturally. The bell jingles, and Sara looks up, but no one seems to walk in, until he's just there. The grey man. Only this time the face is wrong. To normal human eyes he looks ordinary, generic, symmetrical in all the statistically average ways. But Sara's violet eyes aren't human. She can see heat distortion, even gravitational deviation in the air. His face glitches like it's slightly out of phase. He sits across the table from her. Silent. Sara smiles at him.
Nice face. Did you lose the last one in a fire?
I must have the portal back. I didn't realize that jumping used up so much energy, or I wouldn't have lost it in the first place. It's an artifact of your people, but it's bound to me.
He'd said the last 3 words with more than a hint of violence. Sara didn't flinch.
Yeah, I figured you wanted it back when you tried, and failed, I might add, to rip it out of that college kid's hands.
They sat in silence again. Finally, his lips curled back.
It's not a toy!
It's not yours.
Sara hissed. The pair sit in silence for a long second, each sizing the other up. Although the Zorathians and Kren races had been battling off and on for centuries, mostly on, Sara mused to herself, there were not that many face-to-face meetings away from negotiation tables. Sara considered herself lucky. She flicked her eyes briefly to the edge of the table, confirming the faint shimmer around him. He's phasing in and out, residual energy from the last jump, however far, wherever, in Andromeda, to campus. Now here it is again, surrounding him. That means... She sat up just a bit straighter. He's trying to use the book portal to jump again without physically touching it. Kren don't know much about how portals work,
Hey,
Sara said calmly.
I don't think you're going anywhere.
Meanwhile, back at the anthropology basement, something else wasn't going anywhere. Castor had tried every search he knew and basically come up with more questions than answers. A frustrating evening. He decided to try one more. Non-human theories. Took it a second, but it did return something. Celestial exiles and the ethics of non-human integration. That was an unusual topic. Cast slowly closed his laptop and put it back into his bag beside the book. His heart was racing. Not just because he's found a half-redacted thesis buried in an almost defunct student server. Celestial Exiles and the Ethics of Non-Human Integration. The title was enough to race Cast's curiosity into overdrive, let alone the credits at the bottom. Those read Author SS. He had this overwhelming urge to grab the book. He gave in and opened it to a new page, writing itself. It read, "If you stay curious, you better stay brave."
You've been listening to Curvature Chronicles. In our next episode, The Shadows Tighten, as Castor uncovers just how dangerous the book under his arm really is. And Sara and the Kren's deadly confrontation reaches its breaking point. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. For bonus lore updates and content, visit us at curvaturechronicles.space. Until next time, keep your eyes on the curve, because every story bends reality.